Hello and welcome back to Normal Island Live. I do apologise, we are a bit late. I will take responsibility for that. People know in the comments this can happen. I do apologise, I don't take you for granted, and I love you very much, and you will hopefully forgive me because we do have some exclusive stories today and some interesting information on a person who is a hot topic right now. But first, let's introduce our guest. Today we have Banseka Kayembe. Hello.
Hello, I'm super gassed to be back. It's been a minute and lots is happening, but I'm good. Yeah, it's our first show together as well. Yay! I'm very, very excited.
I
I've
know it's
I saw you on TikTok a long while back, and yes, I feel like I'm very familiar with your face. I'm excited to be on the show with you.
and it's going to be hopefully be a good one because, as I said, we do have some exclusive stuff today, and we will be also getting into some stuff on Nigel Farage, onto the ICC arrest warrants that are apparently happening, but we will see what happens. But obviously, just remember, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. And again, coming up on tonight's show, we're going to be doing a little bit of an overview of Nigel Farage and some of the stuff that's going on right now, and a little bit of like exclusive data that we have been looking into at the show. And then also we'll be talking about the apparent arrest warrants that might be in the pipeline at the ICC for senior Israeli officials. But first, let's just go to the first story. It's going to be a big one. So we're going to be waiting a good few minutes to bring our guest back on, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it and it'll be worth it. Now, as we all know, Nigel Farage reportedly hasn't been seen all week. This has been talked about. People are trolling him on social media now. He hasn't actually been seen since he cancelled an event last week in Sunderland, and he's been ducking journalists and cancelling interviews because he doesn't want to answer any questions relating to his £5 million personal gift that he got from crypto billionaire Christopher Harbin. And obviously, we even got newer revelations days after that he actually purchased a brand new property around the same time too for £1.4 million in Surrey in cash. It's a lot of money to have. Now, we're going to start just looking at some exclusive data that we have sourced from the Electoral Commission that no one's really looked at yet. Like, many people already know about the Electoral Commission. They regularly publish data on political donations and finances related to politics and parties, and people have to follow certain rules and regulations about who can donate and who cannot, officially known as permissible donors and impermissible donors. When an impermissible donor is identified by the Electoral Commission, the party, person, or entity, because they can be like a business, they must return the money. We've been analysing the data going back as far as 2001. That's when the data is basically available for. And according to the data, there has been 426 impermissible donations, either from individuals or entities, and again, like businesses. Now, the total amount for these donations is slightly just under £2 million. It's sitting at £1.94 million. Now, this is where it gets a bit juicy, I think, and it gets very interesting because obviously the media love to report on a juicy donor story, right? A scandal or something that might have gone wrong, or somebody who's connected to very dodgy things, or maybe even connected to criminality. But nobody's really paid any attention to the impermissible donors in the Electoral Commission filings. And the story is very interesting. Now, there's been 426 impermissible filings since 2001. 81 of them have been for the Reform Party since its inception, which includes the banner of the Brexit Party. Another 8 of them went to UKIP under Nigel Farage, and 14 of them went to MPs who are either MPs currently in the Reform Party or who were MPs previously in the Reform Party, like Rupert Lowe. Now, what does that mean? Like, if you actually think about it, so we've got 426 in total since 2001, so that means that a quarter of all impermissible donations, totaling £500,000 just underneath, have gone to people and parties overseen by Nigel Farage and his various parties. And just an emphasis on the scale of this, there are almost 1,800 individuals and entities, so MPs or campaign groups like, I don't know, Labour Together or Vote Leave, who are regulated by the Electoral Commission, registered with the Electoral Commission, meaning they have to present their, donors, information, data, financing. 25% of all impermissible donations have gone through Farage and his parties. And again, that includes every MP that has been in Parliament since 2001, every single campaign group, every single party, and 25% of them have gone to Farage and his parties. Now, they have to return these donations if they get found to be impermissible. But actually, if you actually zoom in even closer, so I mentioned earlier there was about 81 that have gone to reform since its inception. 64 of those 426, so 15% of all of them in 25 years, have gone to the Reform Party just since they were elected in 2024. Now, the media is obviously chasing, the flashy stories like Harborne, which obviously requires, attention, but nobody is seemingly looking at the donors who tried and failed to donate. Now, they can be rejected for lots of reasons. It could be they don't have the right, migration status. It could be they haven't been in the country long enough. They might not be a citizen. They might have tried donating from a business, which isn't a business in the UK, donate to a person or a party. Now, due to the limitations of being able to positively identify many of these donors, because we only get a first name and a last name on the sheets, I won't discuss any of the individuals because we can't positively identify them. But for the ones that I think I can positively identify, we should all be very worried about the industries and foreign interests that are, it seems, attempting to get money to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Which leads us on to the next part of our overview on Nigel Farage's donors. Now, we all know by now that Nigel Farage received the £5 million personal gift from Christopher Harborne, and that was leading up to the 2024 election period. And now it seems, and more and more is coming out. Sky News reported last week that around the same period, on the 10th of May 2024, Nigel Farage purchased a house in Surrey for £1.4 million in cash, which we will actually just come back to in a second. I want to paint a bigger picture. Later that year, he also said he purchased an almost £1 million home with a pool in his constituency in Clacton, but that turned out to not be true. It was purchased by his partner, Laurie Ferrari, in cash. It's not his wife, as they were not married, and when questioned about this, they said that she comes from a rich French family, which, when investigated by more journalists over time, her parents lived in a modest £300,000 flat in Strasbourg, and her family's modest business is in debt, and it's seemingly not doing that well, so there doesn't seem to be much wealth there. Then they later said that they inherited money from her grandmother, but when questioned a couple of weeks ago by a French news outlet, Le Monde, and then reported on by The Guardian, they said this. So when asked if she bought the property thanks to a family inheritance, she said yes and no. That would be a very large inheritance. There's more than one way to pay for a house. Is there? I can't say how much my grandmother gave. That's my business, Ferrari added. And then the main thing is that I paid all the taxes and there was no tax evasion and the house is in my name. None of it really seems to add up. They can't actually say where the source of the money came from. Now, if we, again, circle back to the latest discovery of the £1.4 million home in Surrey, which was purchased on the 10th of May, it's a very important date in the context of this story. They came up with another story about where this money came from, but the story kind of just collapsed immediately. So after the story was first revealed, they told the media that the source of the money was easy. It's from his money earnings that he got from his appearance on I'm a Celebrity, which would make sense, right? It seems like, yeah, okay, he got quite a bit of money for that, 1.5 million. Well, it doesn't, because the Financial Times reported last year that Nigel Farage's media company, Thorn in the Side Media, they recorded £1.25 million in profit. And then when they asked them about this, they responded with this. The Reform UK Leaders Company, Thorn in the Side Media, reported a 1.4 million increase in its cash position for the year ending May 31st, 2024. Very important. And that's according to the accounts filed on Tuesday. Farage said on Wednesday that profits registered in the last financial year were largely largely attributable to his appearance on the ITV reality TV show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which he received a £1.5 million fee. Now, anyone out there can go onto Company's House and see his company filings, and what you can see is this. In February 2025, they published the earnings from I'm a Celeb, with the accounts ending in May 2024. Again, remember the dates. And then in February 2026, they published the year ending May 2025, which shows no evidence at all in any of the filings of the money being withdrawn in cash or dividends or shares. So again, the story does not make sense, and Nigel Farage is now hiding from the world, it seems. So if we go back to the purchase date of the property, which is reported by Sky News as the 10th of May 2024. They submitted their accounts in 2025 for the end of May 2024, and the money was still there, and it was still there the year after. So it seems there's a massive hole in the story. It seems that the money didn't come out of the business. It seems that, Laurie Ferrari's money doesn't add up from her side. It's possible she does have hidden wealth. Absolutely possible. But the stories that they've given don't make any sense. Now, before we bring on our guest to discuss this, I just want to share one more thing about this whole story, because it interlinks with lots of different things, because I predict that what I'm about to tell you could lead to an even bigger scandal than what is happening right now. Right, this is an image of Nigel Farage in Thailand in 2022. It's the 2022 Kamalaya gathering. Kamalaya is at Christopher Harborne's resort spa in Koh Samui in Thailand. And then seated from right to left is Nigel Farage. You can't really see him, but that's him. You've got Christopher Harborne, an unidentified man, and Georgia Toffolo. Or, as friend of the show, No Justice MTG said in my comment section on my social media a few weeks ago, of course the Brewdog's Bellen's wife is there. They're not very liked. If you get it, you get it. But back to the photo. It includes Chris Bruni Lowe and George Cottrell. Probably the most important person, I think, in this photo. And also, again, this unknown man. He still can't be identified. Now, just to remind everyone, George Cottrell is convicted of money laundering and wire fraud, and he pleaded guilty to it, but was originally charged with other charges too, like blackmail and a few other charges. I think it was around 21 in total. In 2014, he was subject to a sting operation by the FBI where they posed as drug traffickers and they wanted his services. And he offered them to him because this is who Nigel Farage's friends are. He then flipped the table on them and then essentially said that he was going to grass them in to the authorities, still thinking that these were real drug traffickers, and try to blackmail them and extort them for Bitcoin. It was I think it was 130 Bitcoin at the time, worth like 60, 70,000 pounds. And he didn't know that he was secretly trying to extort FBI agents. He was then later arrested in July 2016 while he was in the US. He was with Nigel Farage, Isabel Oakeshott, the journalist and the partner of Richard Tice, and also Andy Wigmore. And just to insert a mini little anecdote in here, Andy Wigmore was part of the Russia Aaron Banks investigation. He, weeks after George Cottrell was arrested, he went to the Russian ambassador's home in London for a dinner in honor of Aaron Banks and Andy Wigmore. Like, that's literally what the placards said, in honor of them, shortly after the Brexit vote. But I don't want to hash that entire story out again. After this dinner, they actually sent the details of George Cottrell's indictment to the Russian ambassador. And we still, to this day, don't know why. But I'm just throwing that in there. George Cottrell is an unpaid aide to Farage and has been for years, and has been spending his time in Montenegro with these men, Harry Parslow, Gavin Towler, and Chris Bruni Lowe. Chris Bruni was one of the other men in that Thailand photo. Now, they've been working for the ruling party in Montenegro, where they have been accused of laundering cryptocurrency to the political party there, and have been implicated in other investigations where it seems a lot of the money just doesn't add up around the finances and expenses of the said party that they've apparently been working for. Now, this is the same team who now, all of these people that I have just described, those men in the photo with George Cottrell working in Montenegro, potentially implicated in the accusation that George Cottrell has been helping this party launder cryptocurrency, they all now work for the Reform Party. They all work for the Reform Party. So you've got this picture in Thailand of Nigel Farage with his money laundering convicted Bitcoin friend. You've got Christopher Harborne, the crypto billionaire. You've got Chris Bruni Lowe, who is there, who's part of the Montenegro George Cottrell team. And now all of these teams, all of these people seem to now all circulate around and or work or donate money to Nigel Farage. Now, after this photo was taken, the Thailand photo, Christopher Harborne registered a new business, but not in Thailand or the UK, but actually in Montenegro, at the same address as George Cottrell's lawyer. Now, that's not suspicious at all, is it? That is not suspicious at all. Since then, he has donated upwards of 20 to 30 million pounds to either the Reform Party or given, obviously, a chunk of that money to Nigel Farage. Nothing suspicious at all. I do predict that this is going to be a bigger story in the future. Banseka. So, obviously, that is a lot of information. Do we have Banseka?
I'm here. Hello, hello.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Hello, hello, hello. Obviously, that's a lot of information. I just wanted to do, again, a bit of like an overview with a bit of exclusive information there, just showing that Farage has got some very weird people trying to donate to him, an insane amount. We've got all these people surrounding him. Do you think right now he's hiding away, seemingly because of two things? Either he knows how fucked he is, maybe, or he's just hoping for it to blow over and another scandal appears for somebody else and everybody else is distracted by something else, maybe.
I saw someone in the comments referred to him as Nigel Farage, which I think is the thing that's made me laugh the most in the comments. So thank you to whoever said that. I'm nicking that. I'm stealing that for sure. He does seem to have gone underground, and he went underground quite quickly after this £5 million cryptocurrency thing first came up, didn't he? He was meant to be scheduled, I think, week before last or the weekend before the. That's the one. Yeah, he cancelled last minute, and I can't remember who we got instead. Possibly no one. But he just sort of flaked out on that. We didn't hear from him again for quite some time until maybe he had an interview. It was a very softball interview, wasn't it, with the Sun newspaper. I think it was Harry Cole, I think, if I'm not mistaken, who gave, just sort of a chummy chat about, all that money, what's all that about then? And he could just sort of brush it all off very quickly. He kind of sent out people like Suella Braverman before that. She had quite a feisty conversation with Sophie Ridge, who I think rightly did her job as a journalist actually and questioned Suella Braverman on this £5 million cryptocurrency donation. And she was affirming that it was to do with his security. The story is, of course, as we know now, changed. First, it was about his security. Okay, maybe I could have believed some of that. Then it became about a reward for Brexit. By the time Nigel Farage was then speaking to Harry Cole at the Sun, and we've had a sort of myriad of back and forths about, was the money used to purchase the house or not? The accounts don't really seem to line up. The FT had done their investigation with an accountant saying that his accounts didn't make sense if he was saying that he got his house from those winnings from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. So there's a lot happening here. On the one hand, it does seem like he is hiding and avoiding scrutiny. I think that definitely is part of the strategy. I've also thought maybe out of believing these people can't be that stupid, or perhaps they're so full of hubris that maybe it doesn't matter already, but they can't be that stupid to also not be doing something strategic here. I do wonder if he's sometimes doing what I think Donald Trump does, which is to kind of flood the information zone with actually just too much information. If voters in particular, they get so much information about this one story that starts to be very contradictory and this and that, and it all kind of melds together and it becomes too much. And some people, not everyone, of course, not us, but some people really start to check out because it's like, don't know what's going on. There's a lot happening here. I can't pay my rent this month. I can't afford fuel in the car. Can we talk about something like that rather than what's going on in this guy's bank account? So I don't know if they're also sort of banking on the information zone being flooded with quite a lot of different things and different stories that do contradict, that actually eventually people somewhat start to sort of tap out a little bit as well. The other thing that I think also does help, and I'll probably relate this in a sense to the later story on about Israel as well, but I do also think that this scrutiny and this conversation about Nigel Farage and his finances, it does help him to spin a story of David versus Goliath. This is the media giving reform, which just wants sensible policies on migration, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't want open borders, but we're being investigated unfairly about X, Y, and Z. So it also helps him to continue to spin and create a narrative that things are against him and that he's the little man who's worked hard and got a reward for it. And, the media want to give him a hard time by raking him over the coals. And in a sense, the media doing that and his ability to spin that narrative means that he can create a story about himself, about reform that perhaps is appealing to people who do feel really black-pilled by media establishments that have actually failed them, and have failed to do their job. Hence why we're here. That's how we got here, right? That's how we've got to this, in part, to this kind of apocalyptic state that our media and our politics is now in. So I think it's a mix of strategy, flooding the information zone with as much information as possible, doing some of that narrative storytelling, and also just genuinely trying to hide and evade scrutiny and evade difficult questions, avoid being forced to attempt to square the circle on this, which of course he can't.
I think what's really interesting is, have you seen the bits where he said, like where he actually did get questioned about the 5 million? It might have been Sophie Ridge and there's a few others where he said, "Oh, this information's been hacked." Have you seen them?
Yes, I did also see that as well.
I think what I find really interesting is, this is probably just like the nosy kind of like, quasi journalist in me. I want to know how the fuck they got that story. I really want to know, because I am aware of a story that is related to reform, which is related to hacked and leaked information that I know a big outlet has had for months, and they can't get it past the lawyers. I can only say that much for legal reasons.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I know that this outlet has some very good lawyers. And if there's basically a law in the country that prevents people from publishing things about hacked and leaked information unless it is in the public interest, meaning like, I don't know, if, somebody hacked Keir Starmer's phone and it found out he was, busy mates with Putin and texted him every day, like you could publish that under the public interest clause. But there's also obviously lots of grey areas with it. I am really interested to know where they got that 5 million from and whether they know anything else, because it takes a lot to publish hacked and leaked information, which makes me think, or maybe it's not, maybe it's from somewhere else, and what else is currently out there. Like, I know that there are other people investigating some stories related to reform right now that I'm aware of. And I think what is interesting, and I want to know your opinion on this, obviously he's received scrutiny to a certain level, he's hiding away, this investigation's going to go through. Do you think that, I don't know, we'll see what information comes out through the actual process. At some point, we will see Nigel Farage in front of the cameras in like a committee hearing style thing in Parliament. That's going to happen. Do you think he'll be able to like successfully weaponize this? Or do you think it could actually potentially be harmful enough once more is revealed to be his downfall is probably a strong word, but harm him enough to actually really hurt him and the Reform Party? Or do you think it doesn't really matter what comes out, he's just going to continue to get away with it?
Because that's the golden question, really, isn't it? Is how does he keep getting away with it? That was my head scratch when I was kind of first looking at this story. How does he keep getting away with it? I don't know if that kind of... I think there will be at some point. I think inevitably, because what you're saying about this is potentially tip of the iceberg stuff. And again, this is just a hunch. I'm not saying this in any truth-telling capacity, but if I had a guess, I would say that it is quite possible or probable that there will be more to come out about this stuff. I was having a look at Transparency UK, who a campaign, I think, on having transparent money in politics. And they've done some analysis that said from the last Parliament estimated this kind of loophole that they're operating around, which is that this is a gift which is not reasonably related to political activities. I think that's a loophole they've also tried to justify, to say, well, yes, it's a gift, but it's nothing to do with politics, so the whole thing about declaring it wasn't needed. And Transparency UK have said that their analysis from the last Parliament estimates that this loophole was concealing about £5 million of contributions at general elections, and I believe that was the previous general election. And they've said, given what we know now about Harbin's gift, it could have been 10 million or more in 2024. Again, that's just a summation from them, not saying that that's the truth or saying that as fact or anything, but that is a kind of a possibility. So I do believe whilst he will continue to evade scrutiny, I don't think there's going to be any political consequences anytime soon. I don't think there's going to be a consequence that gets in the way of the next couple of years, possibly even, or few years. But I do think at some point this is going to come back to haunt him, and I do think more and more information is going to come out. I don't know if it's going to be analogous somewhat to the Labour Together story, where there was all this information about Labour Together, but the media didn't really report it properly and didn't do its job of informing people properly about who it was that we were electing to this position. Then they get into power, suddenly it all crumbles and falls apart very quickly because we find out actually these people are kind of crooks. And are not behaving in ethical ways. So in fairness, they're probably getting a harder time reform right now than Labour Together were. Labour Together were getting like zero scrutiny whatsoever. So Nigel Farage is getting a little bit more heat than them. Although arguably some of the scale of this in terms of the numbers of finances are much worse in this case. So it's very difficult to tell, I think, at this point what the consequences are going to be. But I think in the short to medium term, he's going to ride it out, I think. But question mark, Andy Burnham on the horizon. I'm not putting all my hopes and dreams in Andy Burnham by any means, but you know, the Labour Party, I think, did make some promises before the last election in their manifesto around sort of cleaning up politics and political donations. They haven't done much yet, I think. And it'll be interesting to see if maybe with Andy Burnham, assuming Keir Starmer's he's a lame duck prime minister right now, so I'm kind of talking about him like he's not there. He is there,
A
kind
lot
of.
of people are.
Yeah, he's there, but he's just sort of an irrelevance, bizarrely now. But assuming we get an Andy Burnham PM, which is not a given, but if that does happen, if he does come back as an MP and becomes elected next leader of the Labour Party, you know, it'd be interesting to know if he may force anything on this. In terms of legislation and closing some of these loopholes, there's popularity for it. The mad thing about this is there is cross-party, you know, across the electorate, there is popularity for a cap on donations. Something like 2/3, you know, or just over 2/3 of people in this country think it's a good idea. So the public support is there, but the will of the politicians, I'm not too sure. So I haven't got a very satisfactory answer for you. I'm not sure what will happen with Nigel Farage. His comeuppance will come up at some point, but I don't know if it will be in time before possibly a big reform win at the next general election.
By the way, quick question for the audience, if anybody can check, because obviously Nigel Farage has been missing for a week. It's supposed to be his show tonight on GB News. I think it's supposed to be 7. Can anyone check, like, if he actually did do his show? Because sometimes he does have a guest replace him. I'd be very curious to find out if he turned up for his show tonight. But like, what's interesting as well, because I have been like deep diving into like research and everything related to his donors for months now. And the one thing that's really frustrating, and people might not even know this, right? When you actually go onto the Electoral Commission and download this information, if somebody is, for example, like a company, it's very easy to go and find that information. The company name has to be listed. The company number has to be listed. You can go and find it on Companies House and find out whatever you want about these people based off of that information. You can also loan money to a political party. Richard Tice has loaned money to the Reform Party. And right now, there is a loaner, not a donor, a loaner to the Reform Party called Malcolm Robinson, who recently loaned the Reform Party £1 million. And if you go onto the Electoral Commission, all you can see is that it just says, Malcolm Robinson, £1 million. That's the level of transparency that we have. We can't find anything else on this person. There's candidates for who this person is. There's a few rich Malcolm Robinsons out there, but other than that, that's the transparency that we get as, you know, people participating in this country, is that we just get a simple name and then we have no accountability. We have no idea who this person is, who they work for, what companies they own. We have no idea what their interests are. And this is the level of transparency that we get. And I think it's just ridiculous that we're basically sometimes just given these breadcrumbs of information. And I don't know if you remember this. This was like kind of like smaller reporting. It might have been last year. It could have been late 2024. Is that actually Angela Rayner and Gordon Brown was actually coming up with some sort of plan to like cap donations. I think it was something like 100K or something like that per person or entity. And apparently they arranged like the entire event, an announcement that they were renting out this place. They were going to do this big press conference. And apparently this was what the reporting said at the time, not proven, just speculated on sources, yada, yada, yada. Apparently Labour's one of the biggest donors, Lord Ali, stepped in and actually just put a stop to it and said, nope, we're not having this. So that's where we're at.
And this is what inhibits, I think, the soft left that has remained within the Labour Party, right? Is that you can't even fulfil aspects of your agenda because your party is bought. You know, Lord Ali is buying Keir Starmer's wife's clothes. You know, like, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. I'm not surprised that if that's true, that he was able to put a stop to it, because that's what they're paying for, I think, isn't it? That's why you're putting the money in. It's not a gift. It's not a grant. It's an investment for these people, for these businesses, for these wealthy individuals. I find it completely insane, by the way, that someone is loaning £1 million to Reform UK like they're a business, which they are. They're a limited company, I believe, still, right? That's what they're formulated under, I believe, still.
I don't even remember what the exact status is anymore. They said they were changing things, but I don't know if they ever did.
Because they still have a CEO. So to me, that suggests you're still a limited company, a private limited company. But I could be, you know, I could be wrong about that. Someone can check me in the comments on that. But I mean, I find that completely wild, that the business, the idea that you are loaning. I don't think anyone should be able to give £1 million to a political party, whether they're donating it or loaning it. But it's interesting that it's operating like this business entity where you're investing like some sort of venture capitalist or something in the economic prosperity of this party. Is that where people's memberships are going to? people's memberships towards reform? They're going to pay off some, like, a loan back with interest, presumably, or was it an interest-free loan?
I
I've
have
no
no
idea.
idea how the loan system works, but those loans exist.
Yeah.
What's also really scary, obviously, if you remember the whole, like, Elon Musk Twitter £100 million thing, I think it was 2024, where people were worried that he was going to donate. Like, he can do that just simply because Twitter X has a registered business in the UK,
Mm.
and that's basically permissible, that you can just simply have a business here and then you're able to donate. And I wasn't completely sure on how exactly the rules work around this, because I was looking at another donor recently who donated £100,000 to the Reform Party in 2025. And then when you look at their company, it came from a company. The only person listed on the company as like the officer CEO is just like one American guy who says that he is American and he lives in America and he's a venture capitalist. And then I'm like, how is this permissible? And then you look at the rules and it's like he has a company registered in the UK. He can donate. It's insane. It shouldn't be like
Mm.
this.
And
It's
it's
wild.
it's very easy to set up a company, right? It's I suppose in theory anyone can do it, right? It's not actually too difficult for anybody here to set up a company, but it's quite strange that people living abroad, who I'm presuming are not really based here. I'm not too sure about Elon Musk. He must have a basis of
He'll
people here
probably own a
for
house
X.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but that strikes me as completely bizarre that people can set up these basically shell companies that are like two people in a trench coat in LA or somewhere or Silicon Valley, but they are able to use that mechanism to interfere with our politics and interfere in our politics, no doubt, in their own interest and not ours. It's really and with this whole cryptocurrency thing, we'll probably get into this a bit a bit more, but I'm keen to talk about that as well. I mean, I think our sort of donation system is completely ill-equipped to deal with the kind of digitization of finance and cryptocurrency and the influence that is set to have, I think, on our politics as well. I mean, that feels like a wave crashing down, a tsunami coming our way as well, which our politics, our legislature seems kind of freakishly out of date on. It's cryptocurrency originally was kind of billed as this sort of libertarian, escaping the institutions, that rightly have, made things worse in lots of respects for people, escaping sort of financial institutions, but it's eventually become a currency, of the far right and the radical right, and the ways for them, I think, to kind of evade institutional oversight and accountability, and for them to continue shaping the world how they best see fit.
Yeah, I can tell you this for free because I've looked into it. Tommy Robinson, for example, if you go onto his, it's technically not in his name, but it's his company. He promotes it that way, Urban Scoop. If you go onto their website, you can see their wallet that they have for donations to support his amazing independent journalism. If you go onto that wallet, and if you understand just how to look basically at crypto transactions, you will see that when you open it up and just click through it, in the last, what are we in now? Is it in June yet? May?
May.
Every single month this year, in total, his company has moved upwards of £1 million worth of Bitcoin every single month. So that's so far
Wow.
£5 to £6 million that his company has moved in Bitcoin through that wallet. And you can never find out where this money is coming from. You mentioned obviously this libertarian idea of escaping institutions. They've been selling crypto for like over a decade now. This idea that, the blockchain crypto is the most transparent thing that's ever existed. You can see every transaction. It's like, no, again, if rich people like this are trying to sell something to you, it's because they're going to benefit from it, and it's probably not completely what it is. You can see the transactions, but they already have methods, and they've had these for over a decade now, where if you want to move £1 million worth of Bitcoin, for example, you can split that transaction up into thousands of transactions instantly and move it rapidly around multiple blockchains through multiple providers like what are the names, like Coinbase or whatever the hell they're called, and then just split them up and move them around, and you don't know the identity of any wallet who owns it. So even if we had access to Nigel Farage's Reform Party wallet, which they say that they don't have, actually, if we saw £1,000 of Bitcoin coming in from a wallet address, you will never know who owns that wallet unless somebody openly admits that that is their wallet. It's actually the least transparent type of financial system that I'm aware of that people are using seemingly everywhere in the world now. It's completely untraceable. Not completely. There are methods, but there are ways to avoid being traced. And it's extremely dangerous because you just don't know the sources of where any of the money comes from.
Absolutely terrifying.
It
Absolutely.
is.
Uh, apocalyptically bad.
It is. We should, though, probably move on to the next story because we want to make sure we have enough time to get to the comments, my favorite part. So thank you. I hope people enjoyed that big section. And I'll be doing more stuff on Farage and donors in the future because I've been working on a lot of stuff related to it over the last few months. Got some juicy stuff in the pipeline. Now, we have reports from the International Criminal Court through media reporting in Israel that they might be pursuing new arrest warrants against senior Israeli officials. And of course, this has sparked an angry response from Israel's far-right ministers, although the court itself has denied that any new warrants have been issued, which is important. It doesn't mean that there aren't any in the pipeline. They're denied that they've been issued, meaning they may have been requested because they didn't deny that part. Now, Israeli media reported that the ICC prosecutors were seeking or preparing to seek sealed arrest warrants for senior political and military figures. Those named in the reports, and again, these are still at this point rumors and leaks and sources, included Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, Defense Minister of Israel Katz, and senior Israeli military commanders. The alleged focus is the possible crimes linked to the war in Gaza and Israeli policy in the occupied West Bank. The ICC again has pushed back against claims that warrants have already been issued, saying such reports are inaccurate, and that leaves an important distinction. Prosecutors may request warrants confidentially, but judges must approve them before they become official. Smotrich said that he had been told a warrant was being sought against him and accused the ICC of political bias. He vowed retaliation and ordered action against Khan al-Ammar, a Palestinian Bedouin village, long threatened with demolition. He basically said that if they seek this, he's going to take out his revenge on the West Bank, basically. Ben-Gvir also reacted defiantly, saying he would not apologize or change course. The ICC says no new arrest warrants exist, but Israeli officials are treating the reports as a serious threat. Now, just to clarify on the sealed reports process, if everybody remembers when the last arrest warrants were handed out by Karim Khan, the prosecutor, he did it very publicly. He publicly did a conference saying, we're seeking them. He then did another press conference when they got them, and that was for Benjamin Netanyahu, and that was for Yoav Gallant, who was the defense minister at the time. He's no longer the defense minister. They also issued, I think it was 3 arrest warrants for Hamas officials, but those people are all dead now. And that was all very done publicly, but we had lots of backlash towards the court. We had stories of David Cameron trying to threaten the court and Karim Khan with destruction and defunding if they continued pursuing this. We had sanctions on judges. We had sanctions on the prosecutor. We had covert Israeli operations going on against the ICC. It's well reported on through the Middle East Eye, through Le Monde, through The Guardian, that they did try and do everything that they can to undermine the ICC. They sent agents to The Hague. They've hacked systems and computers and leaked information. They've reportedly been a part of trying to obviously accuse the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan, who was appointed, by the way, again, I always like to remind people of this, by Michael Gove. Like, he was Michael Gove, the Conservative government's pick for the ICC, and he won. He got picked for it. And they've done everything that they can to undermine the court since then. But this will obviously then continue. The court itself, at this time with the sealed arrest warrants, they don't want the backlash, but it's also another way of actually enacting the law. If they reveal that these arrest warrants are in the process, it means that people might not travel to certain countries. But if they're not actually aware of them, which apparently people are now because there's been leaks, and we don't know who it is, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have every other Israeli official thinking, I can't travel anywhere, really. Obviously, there's still countries out there who'll be like, we're not enforcing the arrest warrants, but those people won't officially know who they are. Like Smotrich, definitely on the hit list. Ben-Gvir, definitely on the hit list. But if you've got other, junior ministers, other types of ministers, whether it's the culture minister, whoever it might be, they're going to be thinking, am I on that list and can I now go anywhere? So we'll have to obviously see what happens. It seems like there's been too many leaks to say that this isn't true. And we know that they've been seeking arrest warrants for over 2 years for Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. So all we can now do is wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, videos of the treatment of Gaza Fatila activists are now going viral today and yesterday, and they're receiving some widespread condemnation, but still quiet from other people around the world. But of course, still no action. But let's just have a quick look at the video that's been doing the rounds over the last 24 hours of the flotilla activists in Israel and how they've been treated.
Free, free Palestine!
שקט, שקט. טובה. עבודה טובה. ככה צריך. ישראל חי. ישראל חי. כן.
זיכוי, כל המטרה כאן זה לראות שאין אנשים בתהליך.
לא להתרגש מהצעקות שלהם, לא להתרגש. ברוכים הבאים לישראל, אנחנו בעלי הבית. הם באו עם הרבה גאווה, כגיבורים גדולים. תראי איך הם נראים עכשיו, תסתכלי. תראי איך הם נראים עכשיו. לא גיבורים ולא כלום, תומכי טרור. אני אומר לראש הממשלה נתניהו, תן לי אותם לעוד הרבה זמן. תן לנו אותם בבתי הכלא של המחבלים, ככה זה צריך לראות. הם באו עם הרבה גאווה, כגיבורים גדולים. תראי איך הם נראים עכשיו, תסתכלי.
That is light work compared to what Ben-Gvir has been accused of already doing for just prisoners of other sorts, Palestinian prisoners and just other types of prisoners too. Obviously, we hope that they all get home safe, but in the meantime, we're getting strongly worded letters and posts on social media from some world leaders about the treatment of these activists. And just to remind everybody, just in case anybody missed this story from either last year or a follow-up to it a few weeks ago, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's in charge of national security and therefore in charge of prisons in Israel, in 2024, or was it early 2025, it was reported that a 17-year-old Palestinian who was in indefinite detention was arrested and detained. He was perfectly healthy at the time. Months later, he deteriorated and he died. The autopsy, which was carried out by the Israeli state, said that his malnourishment basically is what caused his other illnesses to not be able to be, fought off by his body and essentially killed him. He was, in a sense, starved to death, as some people reported it. Just a few weeks ago, maybe about a month or so ago, a case was unsealed related to this case where the judge did agree in Israel that this 17-year-old boy was starved to death under the care of Itamar Ben-Gvir. That's what's happening inside Israeli prisons. Banseka, question before we get started. Do you condemn Hamas, and do you believe Israel has a right to exist? And if you deviate from a yes or no answer, I will accuse you of anti-Semitism. Begin.
Well, that sounds really fair. That sounds like a very even-handed way to begin the conversation. It is a series of Israeli war crimes, but do you condemn Hamas? This is really quite awful. I thought that Ben-Gvir video was, I say shocking, but at the same time, I'm shocked, but also not shocked. I'm glad that, in a sense, my capacity to be shocked by brutality, and as you say, that's the kind of tip of the iceberg, I think, of what the Israeli state has shown itself to be capable of. That's just what they're showing us that they're willing to do to, Westerners. So that sheds light, doesn't it, on clearly what they are indulging in. When it comes to the brutalization of the Palestinian people. I thought it was fairly crickets. Maybe it's just my timeline, maybe I'll blame Elon Musk for that, but it did feel like I didn't hear from too many world leaders. It was interesting to hear from Giorgia Meloni, the quite right-wing Prime Minister in Italy, who actually got a roasting recently, several weeks ago, by someone in the opposition. I can't remember his name, but he gave a really impassioned speech in the Italian Parliament. He really roasted her on the country's continued support for Israel, and they did actually back down, I think, on a couple of aspects. I can't remember specifically what off the top of my head. I think this whole thing about the rumored ICC warrants that may or may not be coming. I suppose it's interesting that Israel has chosen to just right out the gate kind of push a narrative. I suppose that's perhaps a way of trying to participate in a kind of war of information, really, to kind of get out straight out of the gate and just say what they want to say, regardless of whether this is something that will actually be pursued or happen or not. I suppose it does a number of things. One, it continues to provide a very robust pushback on the so-called, rule of law institutions, which they've done consistently, and they've clearly had little to no respect for, and frankly, none of their so-called allies, including ourselves, have either. I also think it does another thing as well, narratively, for Israel, which is that it fits a persecution narrative that I think they like to lean into quite a lot. So whether it's true or not that there will be further arrest warrants, Israel is being singled out to them, as a special case, as something, demonized, when there's lots of bad things happening in the world and there's lots of bad actors in the world, but Israel gets singled out, and that the explicit, not even implicit, but the explicit reasoning behind that often is of course then anti-Semitism is then weaponized when these Israeli war crimes are brought up. So there's this persecution narrative that they lean into. It's a very it's almost the spine, it's the bedrock, I think, of a lot of the way in which they communicate, both internally within the country and outside to the world as well. And that persecution narrative is something you also see other sort of strong men types like Trump and Farage indulge with as well. I think fundamentally radical right and far right politics does thrive on a kind of perceived victimhood, and power holders are these kind of two contradictory things. They're these strong men who can combat anything for the good of the nation. They can do impossible things, whilst at the same time they're also poor victims, and they're David versus Goliath, and they're fighting the good fight against these pernicious institutions and other various different demonized groups of people who are out to get them. A lot of that may well be for their internal audience of Israel as well. Maybe that's less so for Western eyes, and maybe that's a lot for Israel as well, for Israeli citizens. And I think there's an incredibly hyperactive, hyperbolic media within Israel that supports the infrastructure of the apartheid regime. And yeah, I suppose ultimately, thinking about some of the comments as well, to go back to the Ben-Gvir video that we saw, that was really uncomfortable and clearly incredibly dehumanizing, sort of violating sort of what we would regard as sort of norms of how you would treat people who you brought into your country, all for trying to just get aid, by the way, over to Gaza. They're not treating them like they were sending them nuclear weapons or something. They're getting aid to Gaza, or that was the attempt, or that was the mission, that's what it was about, right? There was a tweet in response from somebody in the Israeli cabinet who was condemning Ben-Gvir, but not for the reasons that me or you or anybody normal might condemn what they saw in that video. He essentially, I think it's Gideon Saar, I think he's the foreign affairs minister, and one of the things that he said was basically, look, you're making Israel look bad. This makes Israel look bad when you do all this, so please stop. And there was no kind of emotion there for how the people would have been feeling, how those on the flotilla would have been feeling about the way in which they were being treated, the way in which they're being dehumanized, the way in which they were being brutalized. Having people kneeling down with their hands behind their back, lying down with no control over themselves whilst the Israeli anthem plays over them. It was shocking stuff, being told to shut up, in response to Free Palestine, shutting them up. And the best response that came out of the Israeli cabinet was, please don't do this, Ben-Gvir, because it makes us look bad. It ruins the facade that we are the so-called only democracy in the Middle East. And I suppose that's really quite telling, isn't it, about where Israel is politically, socially, culturally, in terms of how they see things. And we know that Israel is conscious, of course, of how it looks. The likes of Ben-Gvir maybe are so full of hubris with this project that perhaps they aren't thinking in those terms anymore. But there are other people in the cabinet clearly who are still thinking in those terms. There was that great New York Times piece that was broken. Two New York Times pieces, I think. One about Eurovision and the way in which Eurovision is being used as a soft power tool, allegedly, to be able to kind of soften Israel's image and to keep Israel in a sort of more positive state in the West's minds, in Europe's minds, and there was also an NYT piece on the alleged use of training dogs, as well as IDF soldiers themselves sexually assaulting and raping Palestinian prisoners as well, which has been a long reported story, and I was grateful to see that actually taken up by a more mainstream outlet as well. So there's an awareness there of some cabinet members of how some of this looks. you know, how their treatment of certain groups or individuals looks. But it's quite clear that their cabinet is also increasingly being dominated by people who perhaps have that awareness but don't care. They're so full of hubris about what they've been able to get away with so far, you know, waging a war, a silly war in Iran, a genocide in Gaza, continuing their settler antics in the West Bank with almost no friction, you know, no real pushback, no major cuts to arms from the US, which is obviously their main arms supplier, but also the UK, which continues to supply something like 305 licenses out of originally 350. Keir Starmer likes to brag about how they've, you know, resolved that, or, you know, how they've taken a tough stance on Israel, but it's total nonsense, of course. You know, they only cut about 30 licenses or so for F-35 fighter jets that go to parts that go to Israel and essentially kill civilians. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit now. This is just a rant, but all in all, it's rather depressing.
Yeah, there's always a lot of directions you can go in with this topic. I think what really frustrates me about like the UK media coverage is because like you almost like sometimes like celebrate when you see like there is a story in Israel relating to something, and then you're like, oh yes, that 1 in 20 of the stories that I've paid attention to in the last couple of weeks have finally made it, you know, onto the Guardian, or somebody else has finally reported on it, because there's so many stories out there which obviously outrage me. I actually understand from a British media perspective how they don't report on absolutely everything. Doesn't make sense. But there's so many stories out there which I think, how has this not made it into world media? And then even when we do actually get, you know, an actual story, some of them are good, but it's not even framed in the right way for me. I feel like every time that we talk about Benjamin Netanyahu in media, it should be framed that he is currently on trial for bribery and corruption. And that has been a widely reported motivator for his reason to continue the war and stay in power. He's been accused of that. I think that when Ben-Gvir once every other month manages to make it into UK media, it needs to be said that he is convicted of being affiliated with a banned terrorist organization, that he is currently still in and out of the courts for being accused of starving Palestinians in prison because the High Court have ruled that they are, and that people like, you know, Bezalel Smotrich, you know, is constantly called not only for, you know, the complete takeover and ethnic cleansing of Gaza, West Bank, and even touched on, you know, South Lebanon, that sometimes when we're fed these stories, you know, like the flotilla story has made it into UK media, right? But it's still not even necessarily put in the context of like who Ben-Gvir actually really is, unless you truly follow Israeli stories and Israeli media. That people don't understand that someone like Ben-Gvir makes Tommy look like a liberal, right? Tommy Robinson. That he makes Trump look like a centrist in terms of his actions, in terms of his actual rhetoric. He is at Nazi level of genocidal. And that is not even something that I think can even be debated or argued with in any way. He expresses that intent and that wish. Did you see the birthday cake photo about 2 weeks ago? Maybe
Yeah, with the noose on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
just for the sake of the audience, it was Ben-Gvir's birthday, and he was presented by like a settler senior woman in the movement with a cake with a noose on it in celebration of him, because it was Ben-Gvir's whole thing to get this law passed of being able to basically, you know, hang Palestinians through this new law which only applies to Palestinians. And he was presented just a week or two ago with a birthday cake with a literal noose on it. And this is what I mean when I say like Nazi level of genocidal mindset and rhetoric. It's unbelievable that he is not put into that context and presented to people around the world within that context not too often. He's just seen as kind of just some far right guy, you know?
yeah, who's a bit wacky. And as you say, context is key. And that was missing a lot from when that law that you brought up about essentially the death penalty only for one ethnic group, Palestinian people, the way that was reported. It was covered by the BBC and it was covered by, you know, the FT and all of that. But as you say, that context it was seriously missing. Like one of the phrases that jumped to mind, I think it was the FT that referred to that law as a controversial new law. And so, you know, you're already kind of, this might be a bit controversial for some people, you know, pro this or against that. Let's look at this. Let's look at the both sides. You know, sort of the framing around it is wrong, you know, rather than talking about, as you say, as a law that's very much being championed by this extremely far right individual who's, you know, got X, Y, and Z allegations, court cases, etc. Rather than framing it in that way, it's just kind of, it's framed as an aberration. Like, oh, The only democracy in the Middle East. Yeah, they've got this new law that sounds a bit dodgy. Actually, let's talk about it a bit. But it's not. There is not that correct framing of seeing it as part of a wider part of an Israeli apartheid infrastructure, and that really is how we should be talking about these things, not as separate random laws that come up that are just a bit of an aberration, but as part of a wider project that's been going for decades.
Yeah, I feel like if I've said this a few times, and again, I'm not Jewish, I'm not an Israeli, I'm not an Israeli Jew or anything like this, but I feel like if I was personally living in a country, and I'm adding that pre-context on because, they do have a very specific history in recent modern history of crimes being done against Jewish people in Europe, right? But I feel like if I lived in a country with that level of extremism in government, I just don't think I could live here anymore. Like if it was at that level, do you know what I mean? Like someone like Rupert Lowe is so far to the left of someone like Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Like people don't understand. Like he's a white supremacist, but he's saying he wants to deport people generations back. But that is still almost like light work compared to the daily rhetoric and actions of some of these elected senior ministers in government. I feel like almost like calling people like, oh, he's the national security minister. Like, yeah, it sounds senior. People don't realize it's like, it's top 5 role in the Israeli government, right? It's in the banner of like Wes Streeting. It's in the banner of like Rachel Reeves. That's the level that these people are at. And I wouldn't want to be in that country anymore. I'd go if I'd feel like I lost at that point. Like there was no coming back from it. That there's nothing that's going to repair that. And the fact that, I don't know if you know this, but they're about to dissolve the Knesset and pass a law because there's elections due in a few months. This will be the first government who has successfully carried out a full term since the early 1990s, in over 30 years. So in that context, they've been successful. They've been stable. This far-right alliance has been more successful than any government in terms of keeping in power.
I mean, that says something. That says something about the raison d'etre of the country, that this is stability. It suggests that an ethno-state, in plain sight, not in hiding, an ethno-state is the kind of raison d'etre of what this state was supposed to be. And so, in many ways, that makes sense.
Yeah. Let us go to the comments. Hello, producer.
Hello,
like swipe
hello.
sound, like a whoosh.
Hello. I actually said beforehand, because I'm not feeling very well, that I wasn't going to be speaking tonight, but I did want to say that the work you've been doing, Lewis, on the political donations to Nigel Farage is genuinely incredible.
So good.
We, for those that don't know, Lewis has been working really hard in the background. You might not see his face that much on Turn Left, but the stuff he's looking into is stuff that mainstream journalists are doing too. Lewis doesn't sleep. he works until the night. But the work he's been doing and what you can see from tonight with the deep dives is genuinely brilliant. So we've got to give props to that because we don't have any money. We literally don't have any money. Lewis doesn't get paid for this, but it's important. In fact, he's not doing it for clout because sometimes he will pass on information to bigger journalists to get the story out there because the story is more important than us. Of course, we would love to do more Turn Left exclusives, absolutely. But sometimes it's worth realizing that at the end of the day, what's more important, bigging up yourself, sure, or pushing journalism in the interest of democracy. And what we're seeing with reform, I mean, all political parties take donations, right? But reform is on another level, which is a genuine threat to democracy. Like, I personally believe they're going to loot this country. Of course, and obviously Banseka tonight, I'm not just going to gas at Lewis. Banseka's obviously been absolutely fantastic too, as always.
Did we lose Banseka?
I think.
Sorry, I'm still here. I was messing around with my webcam thing, and then it was like going sideways. So I thought I'd spare you all watching me try and figure that out.
Also, by the way, I'm on because I'm not very well. I'm not using my microphone. I'm on my laptop, So that's probably why I don't
Sounds absolutely fine. Thanks for the big up. And if anybody's got any tips or information on Nigel Farage on his donors, please send me a message, because I've had a good interesting few. I've actually had a few interesting people message me with actual genuine leads, which has been really interesting. And if you want to see, like, I've done more stuff which we don't have the time to put everything on Turn Left, but I've put it on like my own social medias as well, so you can go on there and have a look, and you can see something. You can see like basically mostly 2 to 3 minute videos of different stories related to some of the stuff that I've talked about tonight.
Plug your TikTok name so people can find you.
At Lewis B. Aaron, spelled the same way. My name was here before. Lewis B. Aaron with 2 A's.
No, I forgot to add your name. Sorry. The Good Globalist gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much, the Good Globalist.
Thank you very much.
First time I've seen you. I could be wrong. And Michael, as always, completely agree. Banseka is one of the best guests.
Oh, that's
Of
sweet.
course. She's actually a rising star. So we're gonna fight hard to keep her.
I'm not going anywhere.
And actual intrepid foreign donations need to be banned completely. It's quite interesting, right? We are heavily critical of Keir Starmer, but one of the few things he's done, which is pretty good, was to try and ban crypto donations, which of course, I believe it was Christopher Harburn who said that he was going to try and work out some kind of loophole to give money to reform. But it's kind of crazy that foreign donations are generally allowed.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons why they aren't allowed, but there's lots of ways to make them allowed, essentially. I didn't explain it, but there was one donor in the impermissible list who tried to donate £100,000, and then the Electoral Commission declined it and said, no, this is not a permissible donor. They managed to donate through another company a few months later, £100,000. We don't know why. They said that it was permissible. But on one company it was, on one company it wasn't. Like, it's a complete shit show.
Well, it's £12 million given to reform. Was it just last year?
So that's since 2024, the 12 million. Then the 5 to Farage, which is technically separate, but it's obviously still in the same pile. But Harborn has given, since the Brexit period, to Reform/Brexit Party and like other affiliated groups, upwards of £30 million.
30.
Yeah, it's close. It's like 27, 28, I think, in total that we know about. Not including the Ben Habib allegations.
Very interesting how, because we covered the Ben Habib stuff on our show. No one has talked about this.
I asked a few journalists about this. Do you want their response?
Please.
They basically said, obviously, because it's an allegation, you're subject to libel if you publish it. But he said that he can guarantee that there are multiple people now going back to look into those allegations to see if they can find something to make the article more permissible. Because if not, it could just be seen as like gossip, essentially. And you know what? Reform have got some pretty strong lawyers. And again,
are you saying that we been libelous by sharing the video of Ben Habib?
They could try if they wanted to, but I don't think they're going to come after us. But yes, they would absolutely go after. Well, that was Ben Habib's like whole bet, wasn't it? It was like, if they sue me, then we can prove it through court, and if they don't sue me,
but he actually said in the video, Nigel Farage won't come after me because he knows I'm
Yeah.
right. And Nigel Farage at least did threaten it. But again, that's could be scare tactics. But maybe if people want to chuck us some more donations, just in case we were to get sued by Reform. I'm sure we might be all right. I did want to quickly highlight, we had some more donations come in for the lawyer fund. A Fun 561 gifted 10 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much. And Ollie, good to see you again. 5 Turn Left memberships.
Thank you, Ollie.
We should probably go to the rest of our comments. Edward Sexby echoes what I was saying earlier. Good work, Lewis. Really good work on this, mate. Good work, but also you have to sleep as well. Michael,
I've been better over the last week. Obviously, by the way, some of the information isn't just like mine; it's just like crowdsourced. But then other things have been put together. So I don't want to take credit for everything. By the way, just
no,
saying.
but it's a lot of like the looking into Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein files. It's technically public information, but someone's got to go through it.
It's a huge amount of
Sadly.
information to sift through. Huge.
2 million files.
2 million.
A few million-ish.
Few million. Yes, it's nothing. Michael says, I see Reform have gone for the plumber candidate in the by-election. I know we didn't speak about the by-election, but it made me laugh, this comment, because, of course, well, in fact, when, I forget his name, actually, the Makerville candidate, as soon he was
Brian
announced as like a...
Kenyon? What's his name?
Robert Kenyon.
Robert Kenyon, yes, okay. Really funny that he's a plumber, because I just thought it really feels like they're ripping off the Green Party. I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm sure we'll cover this again, but...
Well, he was originally the candidate in 2024 for that same election, right, for Reform. So he loses to Josh Simons in 2024. So in fairness to Reform, got to be fair, that was their OG candidate. He's not just a kind of Timu Hannah from Gorton and Denton. I don't know if anyone saw this as well, but Byline Times actually did produce an investigation looking into some of his tweets, because I believe he had his account suspended under Elon Musk's reign, which is pretty spectacular. So that they've combed through quite a few of his tweets, and Naked Politics did a bit of a summary on that today. But there was he was quite involved in, basically some conspiratorial type theories about the Southport murders, the very tragic murder of the 3 young girls by Axel Rodikabana, I believe his name was. And before we had any information about who it was, he was kind of pushing out lots of conspiracy theories about it being an asylum seeker or a migrant. And they've got a lot of receipts and tweets on that. And so he is, I mean, in the video that they posted of him for his kind of relaunch as the candidate in Makerfield, he seemed like it was very much going down the road of, I'm just a normal bloke who's a plumber, I'm very local, I just happen to want a sensible migration system. And that was kind of the vibe he was giving. And if you look at some of these tweets that have been alleged, he actually has, I would say, some quite vitriolic and much stronger opinions about immigration. So
with the British Union of Fascists.
Yes, I did hear that as well. So there are some connections there, and
It's
he
not
was.
just like, Fred's a bad person.
That's just going to make it more attractive to the Restore voters.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully-
win some of them back.
Yeah. I know, obviously, technically he was the OG, but this made me laugh. We've got Hannah Spence at home. Actually, so he was the 2024 candidate. Why has he been unveiled as a new candidate? That's how Reform have done it. Introducing our new self-employed plumber.
I think it's because you still have to be selected each time, technically. And it's almost
It just
like...
felt like it was a new unveiling of a candidate, though, didn't it?
I think that's how they'd sell it, though, wouldn't they? Because it'll just be,
Yeah.
that's how it'll be sold in the media, essentially.
You don't want to say oh, here's this guy that lost last time. I guess no one would do that in fairness. But yeah, he's quite deep potentially in some somewhat more radical right political circles.
Becca says Robert has great reviews on his business on Google. He's a decent plumber, so I'm gonna assume that maybe he's been review bombed. But if you're friends with a fascist, fucking too bad, I suppose.
But do you know how hard it is to find a plumber, Curtis? Sometimes you're gonna have to hire the fascist plumber. I don't know.
Oh god. Well, at least the trains run on time, I suppose.
You get a discount if you're extra racist as a customer.
Say that again.
So do you get a discount if you're extra racist as the customer? Get these guys out and give me some discount on my plumbing.
These foreigners, why? I'll tell you what, I'll give you a nice discount. Arthur Bumblefoot. I think we've sort of meshed the two stories, but I'm sure it will be covered. But the Irish president's comments about this have been great. Her sister is one of the people being held. So yes, her sister. I forget the president's name. Her surname is Connolly. I should have quickly googled it. But yes, the newly elected Irish president. Her sister was on the flotilla. That video was repulsive, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing, though, as well. That's what they're doing on camera. Every other week, Ben Gvir is creating controversy because he's going to an Israeli prison with Palestinians and taunting them and doing other stuff. This is the same, group of people who just recently let off 5 soldiers essentially caught on tape raping a Palestinian who had to be hospitalized, and their trauma in their area where they were assaulted was so violent that they had to have surgery because of it, and they've just let those 5 people go. So it's shocking, but it's also like not surprising in any way.
Banseka, you referenced an article about reporting on the rapes that happened to Palestinians who were detained.
Yes, the New York Times
It was the New
article.
York Times, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then
Sued.
they got monstered.
Yes, that's
People
true.
got sued, accused of blood libel. It's not just New York Times. There have been other people that reported it too, but it's truly scary that even a mainstream organization, they're not exactly an activist publication, are facing this kind of attacks when we are literally just talking about the truth, which is the depravity of what the IOF are doing. And obviously they keep twisting it as blood libel because of once again they try to sort of conflate the IOF and Jewish people and saying what's classic anti-Semitic trope, but these are things that are literally happening.
I didn't actually include this in today's story because the information was not clear, but I saw in the Times of Israel yesterday that a new law was apparently passed last year, I didn't remember this, where the IDF have to publish records of accusations of sexual assault related to anything to do with the IDF. And it does reference prisons, but it does not break down the numbers correctly. And even Haaretz covered it, and they didn't do it either. So I don't know if it's like they're reporting on what was heard during this committee hearing, but this is just quickly what it says. So the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee receives a report showing that the IDF recorded 2,420 reports of sexual misconduct in military-related circumstances in 2025. The data is presented during a committee discussion held in accordance with a law passed last year. I just explained that part. And it does say specifically it's for IDF, Israel Police, and Israel Prison Service. But they're not actually very specific on who this is actually incorporating. They do reference the fact that it is related to like other people in the IDF being sexually assaulted by other members, but they also then mention prisons. So the breakdown isn't actually kind of like there if we're talking about how many are, because it does talk about like Palestinian prisoner abuse and how the majority is women, but it doesn't properly break down the numbers. But it seems like the information will actually be coming out from the state itself. But caveat, it's self-reported to like up the chain, so it's all based off of the idea if somebody says that they've been sexually assaulted, they say that to an officer, they're then supposed to follow a process where this will then get recorded. So imagine how underreported this is too if they've got this. And by the way, it's up 40% since last year.
Wow.
Yeah, but again, the full breakdown isn't there, so I didn't include it because I didn't think it'd be like a fully useful story in itself, but just a caveat really.
We've had a really interesting comment from Vicky Clee. I do have to challenge Lewis, though. Trump does not look like a centrist next to Ben Gvir. He is also extrajudicially blowing up fishermen. So, I suppose you could, to be flippant, yes, anyone could look like the radical left against Ben Gvir, but Vicky says no, we can't even say that about Trump. He doesn't look like a centrist compared to Ben Gvir. What's your response to that comment?
I feel like in terms of why Ben Gvir is so much worse is because like we always knew Trump was bad, right? We always knew he was fascistic, and obviously this version of Trump in this administration is way worse than the previous one, despite the fact that it had lots of bad things as well. But Ben Gvir has always been this person. He was elected as a person with a terrorist conviction against his name. With his most famous moment before he was elected was in the 90s when he basically, after the former prime minister was killed and assassinated, that he said, he threatened to come after them and come after more people. That this guy has, openly said and advocated for before he was elected to spit on Christians. To, I think he had 50 charges against his name before he was elected, and he was like the most indicted like minister of all time. I feel like that type of person and the way he's acting and what he's doing is still way beyond Trump. Yes, Trump is blowing up people and boats in the Caribbean, which is awful and terrible. But I feel like when you compare that to who Ben-Gvir is at his core and his heart and what he wants to do and what he's already done, I still think it is on scale. And I hate to do the, which one's worse. I still think it is objectively just way worse in terms of who he is. And then people continue to elect him.
Yeah, I suppose there's a thing with Trump where it's like, how much is his heart really in the things that he's doing, or is it just about, a certain level of accruing power, money, finance, control, but you don't really care much about what the actual outcome is? Like, so clearly if it was more profitable for Trump to not be pro-Israel, then that's the position he would take. He would do something else. Whereas I suppose for the likes of Ben-Gvir, there is something deeply ideological, a kind of twinning of a kind of religious extremism that really drives him. And in a sense, I suppose that drives him to be less pragmatic, less flexible than someone like Donald Trump in theory could be, because he kind of doesn't quite have, I mean, he has a thesis and he has a way of seeing the world, but it's, I think it's very much predicated on what can I get for me, whereas I feel like Ben-Gvir is very deep in a kind of religious extremism that his politics is steeped in, to the point where he's filming those videos, I suppose, where that are just clearly breaching all kinds of levels of decency and ethics, and are likely to make Israel's standing in the world plummet. And it's difficult to defend those videos, which is why some of his fellow cabinet ministers were concerned and were worried about the image that projects of Israel. So perhaps in that sense, maybe we can say that Ben-Gvir is worse, but it's...
Just to add in one thing as well, I think it's fair to say, and I think lots of people would agree, is that Trump's not necessarily the driver, right? He likes to take responsibility of things, but we know for a fact that he's manipulated into doing a lot of these things by other people, whereas Ben-Gvir is the driver. He wants to drive, and he wants to fucking put Palestinians on the road in front of him and run them over, whereas Trump will just do whatever he thinks is going to get him anywhere, whether that's, he could be racist one day and like, shaking a black man's hand the next day, whereas like Ben-Gvir would rather, he'd rather, literally spit on a Palestinian's face, and there's no circumstances where he would ever work with them. I think that's just very different to who Trump is.
I don't think that Trump is an ideological fascist. I think
Non-denominational.
Yeah, I think I forget the year. I mean, it might be as early as 2018, maybe. Trump was asked about trans people, particularly.
I was going to say this.
What was her first name? My pop culture knowledge is so bad.
Oh, Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn Jenner, not Kardashian.
Close.
Yeah, he was asked, wasn't he, about like which bathroom we should go to? Obviously the women's, and like his basically just like he took a more like liberal position than fucking Wes Streeting, and even in the 2016 or 15 presidential election, there was trans flags saying trans people for Trump, right? If you're an ideological fascist, like you never would have done that. This is not excusing Trump's politics, isn't it? But I think it's clear to me anyway that Trump could be anyone's political bitch, for want of a better phrase, whereas someone like Ben-Gvir is really locked into his disgusting ethno-nationalist and hatred for Palestinians. His views are locked in. And that's not excusing Trump, because I think he's leading a fascist government. But I do think there's a distinction between leading a fascist government and, like, is he personally a fascist? I think you could plonk him somewhere else in a different kind of government, and as long as he's making money, that's the thing he's probably focusing on the most. I'm happy to have my mind changed, to be fair, though.
It's an interesting conversation.
Let's quickly wrap up with a final super chat, well, final two actually, from not really Rachel Atwood, $2. Sarah Palin knows about reforms. Joe the plumber. Palin, that's a throwback.
Sarah Palin? Oh my God.
Wait, if you don't mind me asking, Banseka, how old are you?
I'm 33. I'm in my
the same age as
age.
me. You don't remember Joe the plumber, Sarah Palin? Same age as me.
Oh, no, I do remember. No, I do. Okay, I hear it. I remember now. Joe the plumber. That feels like 1,000 lives ago, which it was, effectively.
That's when like Sarah Palin was like seen as like the most possible, like extremist possible candidate to come into power as a vice president.
And we really thought we dodged a bullet. We were like, wow, thank God
Wow.
that didn't happen.
Yeah.
We thought that was the extent the right we can go with Sarah Palin. And the thing is, though, like she was seen like really out there in her for her time. She's definitely more moderate than your average MAGA person now, which is, I mean, she's no moderate, but crazy stuff. And then Rachel also says again, or not Rachel says, Nicholas Kristof is very much a milquetoast lib. Forgive me, I don't know who Nicholas Kristof is.
I'm
Does
going
anyone-
blank. I'm going blank too. The name's familiar.
I also don't know. So
Nick
quick Google.
American journalist.
Oh,
Well,
is it the New York Times journalist? Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Oh, right.
Oh, just in reference to the Yacht, I'm assuming then.
yeah, it's the New York
Must be,
Times
yeah.
journalist.
I mean, the reason that they're suing them is, well, it probably terrifies them, the idea that a milquetoast publication on these issues to Israel and Palestine is actually going after and reporting on what Israel does. I imagine that's terrified them, to be losing these kind of institutional publications that have largely been friendly media to Israel.
Oh,
Bex
well,
says
I wonder.
Nicholas
I haven't
Kristof.
looked at the finer details, but I'd be interested to see like how they're suing them, because there's enough evidence out there just for any journalist to publish an article about it. But I know there was some dispute over them getting like a comment from like the former prime minister. So I wonder if it's about him being misrepresented. I don't know. I need to see the actual lawsuit as well. But it's strange that they're doing this, because I feel like there's plenty of evidence to be hashed out in a court session that there's enough evidence to make this claim.
You are 20 years old, apparently, Banseka.
Do you know what?
You're 20.
That's very nice. I'm very glad that I'm not 20 years old, because I think life is very, very hard for people in their 20s now. I feel I'm like a middling millennial, and I already feel like I'm doing better than your average Gen Zer.
Is that not depressing, though? That I thought we were going to be like the last generation that were going to be worse off. We could turn things around. And now we're probably seen, because all three of us are millennials here, we're probably seen as bloody privilege compared to Gen Z.
I think so, man.
Which is depressing, because at least, because I said to my partner, I was like, I don't think our lives in terms of our generation can change, but at least we can fight for the future generation, which is sad in itself, because it sounds like you're giving up on your own generation. But now I'm like, can we even fight for our next generation? And that's something I don't want to think about before going to bed, but those are the thoughts that come in your head. Let's leave that there, because it is 9:20. It's a very long show.
My fault for starting late. Apologies again.
So much for the both of you, and again, thank you so much to our comments. I'm going to hand it back over to Lois.
Thank you very much, Curtis. And thank you as well, Banseka. It's been lovely having this first show with you. Obviously, heavy and scary topics, but it's always nice just to chat these things out.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to co-host with you today.
Where can people find you?
Naked Politics. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and we have a website as well. Sign up to our newsletter and subscribe. We will not spam your inbox with a little article every now and again as well that hopefully will be worth your while.
And hopefully be back on the show soon, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely.
Right, thank you very much. Obviously, again, apologies for the late delays today, but I hope it was worth it. I hope you've enjoyed the Farage story and the topics that we covered. Hopefully more to come in the future. And as always, we will try and cover Israel-Palestine as much as we can, because it still needs more attention. And unfortunately, because there's so much going on in the world, it has been put on the back burner for a lot of people. It's hard to find time to sometimes for anyone to cover it, because there is just something new happening every other day and every other week, which is just causing chaos all over the world. But anyway, let's leave it on a good note. We will be back on Friday, so we will see everybody then. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good evening.